Hello, guys. Today we're going to finally look at English colonization. And to start off with, what we're really going to be talking about this lecture is the motivating factors behind it. We're going to look at the monarchy, the English Reformation, the factors that enabled the English to do explorations of the New World. So, to start off with a little English history, we're going to go to Henry VIII. I'm Henry VIII, I am. He is famous for having six wives. Now, I know you're thinking, Miss, I know that there's people today that have like 20 wives, and there's Mormons, and there's all this kind of, stuff. Yes, but back in the 1500s, when Henry was alive, you could not divorce. The Catholic Church did not allow it. There was this thing called annulment, which could render a marriage ended, but there was no divorce. And for a king, your major thing is your legacy, leaving behind an heir, a male heir to inherit the throne. Henry VIII's big problem is that he doesn't have a male heir. He can't have a male heir. So he needs to get a wife that can produce him one, but he can't divorce the Catholic Church. So what are you to do? You start your own church and you say, hey, there's this thing, divine right of kings. I am a God. Why should the Pope or the church or any other entity be able to tell me how to run my affairs? And so that is the English Reformation that's going to take hold in about 1534. Henry will break with the Catholic Church and name himself the head of the new Church of England, which is going to be really important. This Catholic, Protestant, and then from Protestant Puritan divides that are going to take hold in English society will directly impact the formation of the English colonies in the Americas. Brief rundown of Henry VIII's six wives. So he's actually married first to his dead older brother's widow, kind of icky. Her name was Catherine of Aragon. And if that name sounds familiar, excellent, good, you were paying attention. You know, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella, his wife of Castile, were the Spanish monarchs, the Catholic monarchs of Spain that funded Christopher Columbus's voyage. And so Catherine is the daughter of the Spanish monarchs, and she is going to be much older than Henry when they marry, already a widow, and they are going to have seven children together. Only problem is that only one of those seven children will make it to adulthood, or even just living past a few weeks. Most of them were stillborns. We think Henry probably had some kind of medical problem since all of his wives, all six of them, are going to have issues with having babies. So the only child that lives from the union of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon is going to be Mary Tudor, Mary the First, as she will be remembered infamously, Bloody Mary. Henry is pretty upset that his much older wife can't have a male heir. And although Catherine is awesome, she's the first ever female ambassador in world history. She's a great humanitarian. She does relief aid for the poor. I mean, this is a very awesome woman. He wants somebody younger that can give him a male heir. So he dumps her. Well, problem, she is the Catholic, princess. She is the Spanish princess. The Pope says, I'm not going to tick off Spain by annulling your marriage, Mr. Tudor. And so Henry says, all right, well, I'm the king. I don't need you. And this is interesting because Henry had been a big defender of the faith. He was actually granted that title when he spoke out against Martin Luther's Reformation there in Europe. But he breaks with the church in 1534. Parliament makes it official. He is now the King of England, the head of the new Church of England. The Anglican Church is born. No longer is England under Henry a Catholic nation. He marries Anne Boleyn, and she will give him Elizabeth, who will become Elizabeth the First. Very important. Elizabeth and Mary are going to be half sisters, and the problem with Anne Boleyn, though, is that she can't seem to have any other children after Elizabeth. So again, Henry's got the same problem. He's already got a wandering eye cast on Anne's lady in waiting, one of her maids, a lady named Jane Seymour. And so Henry does kind of one of the most infamous and terrible things in history. He trumps up charges against his wife Anne Boleyn and has her beheaded. And so the Queen of England is killed. And so Henry can marry Jane Seymour. And they have a son, a sickly little boy named Edward, who will inherit the throne, but only live of 15. Jane Seymour dies from complications to that birth. So then Henry's going to marry Anne of Cleves very shortly, a princess of Germany who we saw a picture of. And then when she showed up in person, he said, "You're not what I was promised." And he basically says, "Let's just be friends." I think actually Anne of Cleves probably got the good end of the deal when you look at what happened to his other wives. So after the German Princess Anne comes the very young 16-year-old vivacious Catherine Howard. Henry is a man nearing his 50s, and this is a 16-year-old who doesn't want to be with a gouty, fat old king. And so, of course, within a year, she is caught basically cheating on her much older, nasty husband. And so she is beheaded. She's actually the cousin of his second wife, Anne Boleyn. So they both get beheaded. And his last wife finally is going to be Catherine Parr, and she outlives the king. But I say all of this, the six merry wives of Henry VIII, because again, this is the birth of the Church of England. There will be a big schism that develops between the children after Edward's death. Mary takes the throne, tries to bring back Catholicism. Elizabeth, when she takes over the throne from after Mary's death, is going to bring back the Protestantism that her father had began. And so that's kind of what's going on religiously in the lead up to colonization. Elizabeth I will be the first English monarch to sponsor English colonization to the New World. Hey guys. So, of Henry's children, recall that Mary's the eldest, but having a male heir trumps having a female heir, which at this time was not really a thing. So, upon Henry's death in the 1540s, it's his sickly young son at the age of 9 who assumes the English throne, Edward VI. And Edward's only going to be the King of England for about 5 years before he dies from illness. Again, he was sickly his whole life, this son of Jane Seymour. And so he's gone. Now, he continued Henry's Protestantism, but when he dies, it's his half sister, Mary the First, or Mary Tudor, or Bloody Mary, as she's called because of this, who inherits the English throne. Lady Jane Grey. We're not even going to go there. Uh, but regardless, Mary wants to bring back the faith of her mother. Remember, she is the daughter of Catherine of Aragon. She's of the Spanish line, the Catholic line. She wants to bring Catholicism back to England, and there's a massive reorganization where she attempts to persecute many of the new worshiping Anglicans there in England for not being of the true, she says, Catholic faith. So this is where she gets the moniker Bloody Mary because of the deaths that occurred during this reorganization of the church. While she is only around for about 5 years, she also succumbs to illness. And then it's her younger half sister, the daughter of Henry's second wife, Anne Boleyn, who is going to be crowned the next English monarch. And this is really where things get going for the United States because that is going to be Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. Spoilers, she doesn't take a man, she never has a baby, hence the title, the Virgin Queen. But Elizabeth is very smart. She spoke many different languages, and by not taking on a husband, she also kept England very independent. And this is going to lead to major conflicts with Spain. Philip, who is uh, the son of the Holy Roman Emperor, the current king of Spain during this time, he had married his cousin, Mary Tudor. And when she died, him being a kind of in-law king of England through proxy, through this marriage, this king of Spain, Philip II, he approaches Elizabeth and says, "Hey, darling, how about we get together so I can continue ruling England?" And Elizabeth says, "Thanks, but no thanks. I want to keep my options open." Philip does not take kindly to this. It's not just the slight that she's rejecting him. Okay, yeah, that's cool. I love Elizabeth for it. But it's mostly the fact that now he doesn't have any formal political ties over England and Ireland. And so this is largely going to be the major reasons why the attack in 1588, known as the Spanish Armada, will occur. And Elizabeth, who had been the leader of England, and she brought back Protestantism. She is going to be the leader of the Church of England, like her father Henry VIII was. She does away with the Catholic reforms that Mary had brought. Um, but this Protestant queen Elizabeth is has war waged on her by the Catholic King Philip II and the Spanish Armada. Hundreds of Spanish ships, over 10,000 Spanish soldiers. They're coming for England in a big way. Spain had the greatest fleet in the world at the time. Remember all the exploration they've done, all the gold that they found in Mexico, in the Andes. Spain is seriously looking really strong right now. And it looks like tiny little island of England with its tiny, maybe faster, but also smaller and weaker ships just has no chance. So it is a very big surprise victory in 1588 when the Spanish Armada is defeated by the English. And really, then the English don't really lose a single ship, but really it's the storm. It's natural disaster that really causes the Spanish Armada to be defeated. Much more so than like anything that the English fleet under Sir Francis Drake, the famous privateer pirate, excuse me, something in my throat, is going to be able to do. So, all that aside, what does this mean for America? Well, this is all in the midst of England doing its very first colonies to the United States. Sir Walter Raleigh, great poet, author, explorer, um, merchant, military guy, like basically a Renaissance man of the era. Sir Walter Raleigh is going to popularize tobacco in England at this time. He becomes a favorite in Elizabeth's court. Maybe there was a little, smoldery eyes going on or something. But basically, she charters him for 7 years to have free grant to settle the New World in England's name. 7 years to go set up a colony for England. And he is going to set up the Roanoke colony, which actually, well before Jamestown, is the first English settlement in North America. And that is going to be right before the Spanish Armada happens. So that is going to be a big deal. Why does Elizabeth grant Sir Walter Raleigh these 7 years to set up the settlement? Why is England interested in colonizing? Well, as you might have assumed, resources come into play. Look on the map here. England is an island. Well, Britain is the island that England is on. England's the part that's in the dark green. You have Scotland up here, Scotland. You have Wales, the Welsh, and then you have England. London's right there. As an island, it lacks a lot of its own resources. It has to find those from other places, from colonies, raw materials, and that's going to be essential and become the foundation for the triangular trade system, getting us into colonial America and the American Revolution and all these other factors. In addition to raw materials, foodstuffs, remember also that prior to Elizabeth granting Riley this settlement rights, that the Spanish had been raking in vast amounts of gold and silver, mountainfuls, ship after ship laden with gold and silver. England has been pirating a lot of that and seeing for itself just how wealthy this new world was. So England does have hopes that they can find their own silver mountain, their own mountains of gold in the new world. But yeah, resources are going to be a major thing, and also markets to sell their resources to. Never forget the other side of that, that you can have all the resources in the world, but you're not going to get your people working and have a solid foundation for economy unless you have a market to sell your manufactured goods to. Markets. And another thing with the island, as far as motivating factors for English colonization go, as an island, England lacks space above all else. They lack land. Okay. So all of the peasants, the poor population, even middle class, they lack in land opportunity. Owning land gives you a certain degree of independence. Independence equals freedom. That you don't have somebody over you, a landlord, telling you how to live your life and what you have to be doing. Owning your own land was freedom back then, more than probably anything else. And it's still in many ways the same today. So, for English citizens, powerful motivating factor will be the opportunity for land in this new world. They don't see it as land that the natives own. They see it as vast, unmanned, free land for whoever's willing to go there quick enough to grab it. That's how they saw it. So Sir Walter Raleigh, a favorite of the Queen's, in 1585, he's going to establish Roanoke. Not himself, he sends over men to do this. The first establishment fails. 1582, he's granted that charter by Elizabeth. She's not personally risking any of the crown's finances. This is financed entirely on the shoulders of Sir Walter Raleigh, and he is going to be putting his financial assets at great risk, as we will see. With the first settlement failing, he tries again, 1586, sending over as the colonial governor in his stead a man named John White. And interestingly, John White's granddaughter, Virginia Dare, will actually be the first English baby born in America, Virginia Dare. And Virginia, by the way, is where Roanoke colony will be established on the Chesapeake. Virginia, named after Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. Thank you to our sponsors, right? But anyway, remember that Sir Walter Riley's not personally going on this mission, but he is financing it and a great personal risk. So in 1587, John White is recalled back to England to try to get more supplies. That was why the first settlement had failed, lack of supplies. But in 1588, the Spanish Armada comes. Elizabeth calls all English ships in, so all hands on deck for this massive invasion fleet coming at them from Spain. And so it's not until years later, like 3 or 4 years later, that John White is able to return. And oh yeah, like on his return voyage, he's saying, "Hey, I need to get back to my daughter, my granddaughter. Let's hurry. We need to bring these supplies. I'm trying to save my colony." But the people who were going back with him on his return voyage, they wanted to stop down in Cuba to try to do a little raiding of Spanish galleys. Those are big Spanish ships that were laden with gold. So he's delayed even further. And when John White does finally make it back to Roanoke with supplies, no one is there. That's why we call it the Lost Colony. And they disappeared. All the settlers at Roanoke basically disappeared without a trace. There weren't signs of struggle, there weren't skeletons. The only clue that White had really to go off of was that carved into some of the trees around the settlement was the word Croatoan. And then some of the other trees just CRO. Now, Croatoan was an island off the bay. They weren't really able to go look at it immediately, but they didn't see any signs of life there. Croatoan could also imply maybe that the settlers had gone and assimilated with the natives to try to save themselves as they were starving, and that a lot of historians agree that that's very plausible. Definitely, out of the two choices of dying from starvation or trying to integrate into Native American life, I think most settlers would probably choose the latter. But we don't really know what happened to this lost colony of Roanoke. All we do know is that it was founded in 1587, and a few years later, it completely falls apart. And the first English settlement was a failure. Sir Walter Raleigh lost a lot of money. If English settlements are to succeed in the future, they're going to have a lot more than just a single investor because they're going to need a lot more resources devoted to them. So, big picture, just remember that Roanoke was the first English settlement in the Americas, and it definitely failed.